I walked into my brother's engagement party, and the first thing I heard wasn't music or laughter or congratulations. It was her voice, sweet like champagne and sharp like a blade. The bride leaned in to her bridesmaids and whispered with a sneer, "The stinky country boy is here." And everyone around her giggled like I was a stain on her perfect night. I stood there with my boots on Italian marble, feeling that old familiar heat crawl up my neck the way it did when I was a kid, and my family decided I was the one they could joke about. The part that almost broke me wasn't the insult. It was how easy it was for her to say it like I didn't count, like I never had. What she didn't know was that I owned the hotel she was standing in. Every chandelier, every glass in her hand, every door she thought she could run through. And she definitely didn't know her family was about to learn that truth the bloody way by having their lies dragged into the light in front of everyone they were trying to impress. Because some nights don't end with a toast. Some nights end with a reckoning. My name is Jace Calloway, most people just call me Zeph. And I'm about to tell you the night I stopped being the country boy my own family looked down on and became the man who decided what happened next. But before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me and listening to me. Comment listening below or tell me where you're watching from. I love hearing how far my story can reach. Sometimes even the smallest connection makes it feel like I'm not carrying this alone. Thank you. And if you've ever been treated like you were, less like you were the one people could dismiss, please consider subscribing. It doesn't just help the channel. It tells me these stories matter, and that someone out there actually cares what happens to the people everyone else overlooks. All right. Now let me tell you everything. All right. Now let me tell you everything. The ballroom doors opened like a mouth-warm air-cold light and that polished kind of noise you only get when everyone in the room is performing. Monarch Arc always looked like this when someone wanted to be seen. The chandeliers hung low and arrogant, scattering diamonds of light across Italian marble that could make a pair of scuffed boots feel like a crime. Tonight the boots were mine. Clean, yes, but still boots. A plain black jacket, no logo, no designer scream. A watch that didn't beg for attention. I dressed like a man who didn't want anything from anyone because the truth was, I wanted one thing I was never offered: to walk into a room with my own family and not feel like I needed permission to exist. At the entrance, the security detail scanned invites with that crisp efficiency my hotels trained into them. Eyes up, hands, steady, polite smiles that never slipped. I could have walked past them with a nod, and a name could have ended the act before it started. But I didn't. I kept my shoulders loose, my face neutral, and I reminded myself, don't let the emotion drive. This place was mine in every way that mattered on paper. It just wasn't mine in the one way I'd spent my whole life craving. The room was absurd. Ice sculptures shaped like swans, actual swans glittering under spotlights like they were alive. A champagne tower higher than the DJ booth bubbling and spilling into crystal flutes that servers replaced before anyone noticed an empty hand. Flowers everywhere, the kind of arrangements that looked less like romance and more like conquest. And behind the small stage, a wide screen already rolling through engagement photos, soft focus smiles, and curated sunlight. My brother and his bride in beach light and restaurant light, in the kind of love you believe in when you've never been taught to doubt. I took one step in and heard her before I even saw her. The stinky country boy is here. It didn't come from the stage. It came from somewhere slightly to the right, close enough to carry, quiet enough to pretend it was private. The bride's voice sweet like she'd been sipping champagne all night, sharp like she'd been saving it. I turned my head and found her Blair Ashford standing in a pocket of bridesmaids in dresses that looked like they cost more than my first car. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't have to. Her eyes stayed on her friends as if she'd just spotted a bug in the corner and wanted credit for noticing. The giggles that followed weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They were the kind of laugh people use to prove they belong in the same tribe. A few guests nearby glanced my way, did a quick inventory from my boots to my jacket, then looked away like I'd introduced static into the aesthetic. Someone's mouth tightened. Someone else's eyebrow lifted, and for a second, the room tilted, like I was 17 again, standing at my mother's kitchen counter while she explained with a calm that cut deeper than yelling why Evan mattered, and I didn't. I didn't react. Not outwardly. Inside, the sting landed exactly where she meant it to. But I'd learned something from being underestimated. My entire life, emotion is loud, and loud makes you visible. Visibility is what people like Blair feed on. So I swallowed it. I let it burn. And I did what I always did when I needed control. I assessed the room like it was a system. Stage location, screen behind it, DJ booth to the left, soundboard and lighting controls tucked near the back. 2 main exits, one by the entrance where I stood, another near the bar. Side doors that led to the corridor, and service routes, one behind a heavy curtain near the kitchen, one closer to the restrooms. I clocked the angles, the sight lines, the security positions, the places a person would run if they panicked. I noted where the family table sat near the front, close enough to the stage that the important people could be seen. Close enough that any drama would splash onto them first. That's when I felt it, someone watching me with recognition, not judgment. Across the room near the edge of the dance floor, Rowan Pike stood with the posture of a man who could make a hotel run through a power outage and still have guests compliment the ambiance. The general manager. My guy. He caught my eye for half a second and I saw the question there. Do you want me to step in? Do you want me to end this? I gave him nothing but a minimal nod, the kind you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. His expression didn't change, but he understood. Tonight I was nobody. Tonight I wanted them comfortable. Underestimating me was part of the plan, even if they didn't know they'd stepped into it. I moved toward the bar, not too fast, not too slow. I didn't weave around people like an apology. I walked like I belonged because I did, even if no one here would admit it. A server passed with a tray of flutes. I ignored it and ordered like a regular guest. Bourbon. Neat. No special request. No name drop. The bartender, young, focused, set the glass down like he'd done it 100 times tonight. His eyes flicked up for a fraction of a second, maybe recognizing me, maybe not. If he did, he didn't show it. That was the thing about real professionalism, it doesn't perform. I took the first sip and let the burn settle the ache in my chest. Around me, the party swelled, laughter, rising music, shifting into something upbeat. Blair floated through it all like she'd been designed for rooms like this, air-kissing cheeks, touching arms, posing for photos. Everything about her was calculated. The tilt of her chin, the way she laughed half a beat late, the way her smile didn't reach her eyes unless someone with money was watching. And her family, her father Graham Ashford, stood nearby like a man trying very hard to look like a man who had nothing to fear. Big shoulders, polished suit, confident nods. Her mother Celeste glittered beside him in jewelry so bright it looked like it had its own lighting crew. They were exactly what my mother wanted to be seen with. Exactly what Evan believed he'd won. But there was something about them. Something too tight. Too glossy. Wealth can be loud, sure, but the loudest kind is usually the kind that's compensating. And they were compensating for something. I could feel it. Like actors who've memorized their lines but keep checking the wings to make sure the stage manager is still there. I let my eyes drift toward the family table. Evan stood with Blair, his hand resting at the small of her back like he was anchoring himself to her. He looked happy, not the kind of happiness you post online, the kind you carry in your shoulders without realizing it. That should have softened me. It almost did. But then he laughed at something Blair's friend said, and I saw how blind he was, how eager he was to believe the story he'd been sold. For a second, a thought hit me so hard I nearly set my glass down. I should leave. I didn't owe them this. I didn't owe them another night of swallowing humiliation for the privilege of being tolerated. Then the screen behind the stage flashed to another photo of Evan and Blair, her head on his shoulder, his smile wide and trusting, and I made a different decision. I wasn't staying because I wanted their approval. I was staying because something in my gut told me the night wasn't what it looked like. And because if my brother was walking into a trap, I'd rather cut my hands pulling him out than watch him fall and tell myself he deserved it. I checked the time on my quiet, unremarkable watch. Just after 8. The big welcome toast, the one everyone would hush for, was scheduled for 9. I remembered that from the invitation. From the timeline the event staff had circulated. From the way Monarch Arc ran events, predictable, polished, controlled. I stared at Evan a moment longer, at the bride beside him, at the family that had already decided I was a joke. And I promised myself one thing: I would stay until the 9 o'clock speech. Whatever happened after that, I'd face it. Even if it turned into a cut that never healed. My mother found me the way she always had, like a scent she didn't enjoy but couldn't ignore. Lorraine Calloway approached with a smile that didn't commit. She looked me up and down, pausing at my boots like they were personally insulting her. "You made it," she said, "and if you didn't know her, you'd think it was warmth." I knew better. I wasn't sure you would. I said I would. I replied. My voice stayed calm, steady, neutral, the safest tone in my family. Her eyes flicked toward the crowd, then back to me. "It's an engagement party, Zeph. People dress for the occasion. The Ashfords are refined." She emphasized the word like she was teaching me a concept I'd missed in school. "You don't want Evan to be embarrassed." There it was. The mission statement of my childhood dressed up in polite language. Don't be a problem. Don't make your brother look bad. Don't make me have to explain you. I came straight from work, I said, keeping it short. Didn't have time to change. I didn't add work means a portfolio meeting, 2 calls with investors, and a walkthrough of a renovation floor in one of my properties. I didn't add I could buy everything in this room twice and still sleep fine. Because if I said any of that, my mother wouldn't hear success. She'd hear inconvenience. She'd hear a threat to the story she'd been telling herself for years, that Evan was the one who rose and I was the one who ran away. Lorraine's mouth tightened, a small motion that took me back instantly. Cottonwood, Idaho. A kitchen that smelled like coffee and disappointment. Evan coming home with a trophy, Lorraine's face lighting up. Me coming home with an A, her nod barely registering. Every effort I made measured against my brother like a ruler held to my throat. In Cottonwood, everything was small. The high school, the grocery store, the town gossip. But the comparisons were huge. Evan was the golden boy sports grades charm. The one who made my mother feel like she'd done something right. I was the quiet one, the stubborn one, the kid who asked too many questions and didn't smile on command. If Evan took the lead in a group project, he was a natural. If I did, I was controlling. If Evan made a mistake, it was a learning moment. If I did, it was proof I'd never get it together. So I left at 18 with a bag that weighed less than the things people assumed about me. I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because I couldn't breathe in a house where my worth was always being negotiated. My first job in the city was the bottom rung of a boutique hotel, trash bags, vacuum lines, bathrooms that never seemed fully clean no matter how long you scrubbed. The uniform itched, my hands cracked. Guests looked through me like I was furniture. But I learned. I watched how the front desk handled complaints. I listened to how managers spoke when they wanted something without saying it. I memorized the rhythm of operations, how a hotel wakes up, how it feeds itself, how it hides its chaos, so guests think perfection is effortless. I took every shift I could. I asked questions when no one wanted to answer. I stayed late. I showed up early. I climbed not because anyone believed I would, but because I had to. And when it started working, when my raises turned into savings, and my savings turned into a down payment, and that down payment turned into my first property, I kept it quiet. Not because I was ashamed, because I understood my family. If they knew, they'd call it luck, timing, a fluke. Or worse, they'd decide it belonged to Evan. That Evan deserved the credit, the pride, the spotlight. Lorraine's pride had always been a finite resource, and she'd already allocated it. Now, standing under chandeliers I owned, I felt that same old pull to shrink. I didn't. Lorraine leaned closer, her voice lowering as if secrecy made her kinder. Just try to be pleasant tonight. Don't start anything. Blair's family has a lot of connections. This matters for Evan. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. Everything in my life, even now, was filtered through Evan's benefit. Got it, I said. Pleasant. She gave a small, satisfied nod and drifted away, immediately brightening her smile for a group of women nearby. I watched her posture change the way it always did when she was with people she wanted to impress. That was another thing I learned. Young, my mother could love you in private, but she lived for the public version of herself. I took another sip of bourbon and turned, intending to disappear back into the edges of the room. That's when Evan found me. He crossed the floor with a grin like he'd been drinking happiness all night. "Zeph," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder the way brothers do when they want to act close without having to be close. "You made it." "Yeah," I said. "Wouldn't miss it." He didn't hear the effort under the words. He was already half-turned toward the stage, toward Blair, toward the future he'd picked. "Isn't this insane?" he said, gesturing at the swans, the champagne, the flowers. Blair wanted something elegant. Her parents went all out. I followed his gaze and saw Blair laughing with a bridesmaid, her hand raised mid-gesture. The light caught something on her finger. At first, my brain rejected it, like it was trying to protect me. Then my eyes focused and the room sharpened into something painful. A signet ring. Old. Heavy. The kind of ring that doesn't look flashy until you know what it is. The kind of ring you don't buy at a mall jewelry store. It sat on Blair's hand like it belonged there, the engraved face catching chandelier light with every casual movement. My throat went tight. "Where'd she get that?" I asked, keeping my voice steady with pure will. Evan's grin widened. "Oh, Mom gave it to her." He said it like he was proud, like it was sweet. "Grandpa's ring, as an engagement gift. Isn't that kind of perfect? Blair loves vintage stuff." I felt the air leave my lungs in a slow, quiet theft. Grandpa's ring wasn't just vintage. It was a promise. I could still see my grandfather's hands, big, rough, smelling faintly of engine oil and winter air, when he'd pulled the ring off and pressed it into my palm the day he told me I'd make something of myself. "You've got grit, Zeph. You're the one who doesn't fold." He'd said it in front of Lorraine. She'd nodded, even smiled. She'd watched him choose me, and for once it had felt like someone in that family saw me clearly. And now it was on Blair's finger, shining under my chandeliers like that moment had never happened. Evan kept talking, oblivious. "Mom said it should stay in the family, and Blair will be family, so my brain finished for him, "You don't count." I forced myself to breathe through my nose, slow and controlled. "Yeah, I managed. That's generous." Evan beamed. "Right. It means a lot to Blair." She said it makes her feel welcomed. Welcomed. The word hit like a slap. Across the room, Blair turned her head slightly and caught my stare. For a fraction of a second, her eyes narrowed with satisfaction, like she'd just won a game I didn't know we were playing. Then she smiled, small, perfect, and lifted her hand as she spoke to someone else, deliberately placing the ring in the light. A tiny motion. A quiet flex. The kind of cruelty that hides in manners. I swallowed hard, the bourbon burning down into the part of me that wanted to explode. And that's when I understood this wasn't an accident. Lorraine hadn't forgotten. She'd been there when Grandpa promised it to me. She'd heard it. She'd seen it. She'd simply decided that Blair and Evan's story mattered more than mine. That my pain was an acceptable cost for their picture-perfect moment. I looked at Evan, at his open face, his trust, his ignorance. Part of me wanted to rip the ring off Blair's finger in front of everyone and demand my life back. Another part of me, older, colder, knew that would only turn me into exactly what they already believed I was the problem. So I smiled because I'd learned how to survive in rooms that wanted me small. "I'm gonna grab some air," I said. Evan barely noticed. "Yeah, sure. Hey, stick around. Dad of the Year toast is at 9, you'll love it. Graham's got this whole speech planned." Graham, the father, the man who'd looked too polished, too controlled. As I moved away from the family table, I kept my face neutral, my steps unhurried. But my mind was racing, stacking details like bricks. The ring. The way Blair watched me. The way Lorraine had warned me not to embarrass Evan. The way the Ashfords performed wealth like it was a costume. While guests clinked glasses and posed for photos, I watched Graham Ashford again. He'd been smiling a lot, shaking hands, telling stories. But every few minutes, his gaze flicked down to his phone like it might bite him. He stepped away from a conversation twice in less than 10 minutes, slipping toward the side corridor and returning with his smile slightly reassembled like he'd taken it off to breathe. Celeste stood at his elbow glittering, but her hands weren't still. She kept touching her wrist, adjusting a bracelet that didn't need adjusting. She brushed her fingers against her necklace, then her earrings, then her rings. A nervous checklist. Like she was afraid something valuable might disappear if she stopped reminding herself it was there. Wealth doesn't do that. Fear does. The noise in the ballroom started to press in on me. The laughter, the music, the way everyone moved like the night was simple and safe. My chest felt tight not just from the ring, but from the growing sense that something was wrong under all this sparkle. I didn't want to blow up at my family table. Not here. Not yet. If I was going to feel anything, I needed space to feel it without making it entertainment for people who already thought I was beneath them. So I did the only thing that made sense. I slipped toward the back, away from the stage, away from the camera phones and the curated smiles, and I headed for the corridor behind the ballroom, the one that led toward the service areas and the quieter veins of the hotel. I told myself I just needed a minute to breathe, a minute to calm down, a minute to decide what kind of man I was going to be tonight. I had no idea that one hallway, one turn, and one overheard sentence was about to flip the entire night on its head. The corridor behind the ballroom felt like stepping out of a movie set and into the machinery that made it believable. The music dulled into a muffled heartbeat. The air changed cooler, cleaner, faintly metallic with the honest smells of sanitizer and linen carts, and hot food rolling out of the kitchen doors. The carpet gave way to service tile. The light overhead wasn't flattering. It didn't have to be. This hallway wasn't built to impress anyone. It was built to move bodies and trays and secrets. I walked slower than I needed to letting my breathing catch up to my pulse. The ring on Blair's finger kept flashing in my mind like a strobe. My grandfather's hands, his voice, my mother watching. Then Blair smiling like she'd been handed a trophy with my name scratched off. Ahead, the service corridor bent left toward the AV room and the stairwell down to the garage. A set of double doors stood half open and I almost turned the corner without thinking, until I heard a voice I recognized, tight and low, a man trying to keep control of his tone while losing control of everything else. Graham Ashford. He was around the corner, out of sight, but close enough that I could hear the way his shoes shifted on the tile. Close enough that I could hear the soft scrape of his watch against his sleeve as he brought his phone back to his ear. "Listen to me," he said. "This has to happen. We just have to get through tonight. The Callaways have money. Once the ceremony is locked in, we're fine. Just get us to that point." I stopped so hard my heels squeaked. The Callaways have money. My first reaction was a bitter laugh that never made it out. What money? Evan had a mid-level management job with a salary that covered a decent apartment and a decent car and not much else. My mother lived off the illusion of stability, not actual wealth. We weren't a family with a trust fund and a lake house. We were a family with a mortgage and pride and a whole lot of pretending. Graham's voice dropped even lower. "Don't call me with doubts right now. I'm telling you it's handled. We just have to get through the ceremony and then everything settles." The word ceremony hit me like a warning flare. This wasn't an engagement party problem. This wasn't a rich people are rude problem. This was a timeline, a plan, a finish line. I stayed still, body angled like I was checking my phone, eyes fixed on nothing. I didn't want him to hear my breathing. If he turned and saw me, he'd rearrange his face into that bright, harmless smile, and I'd lose the only honest thing I'd gotten out of him all night. A pause. The faintest exhale from his end of the call. Then Graham said, "No. Not tomorrow. Tonight. I can't have this slipping. Not after everything." He ended the call, and for a moment I heard nothing but the distant bass of the party and the hum of ventilation. I waited until his footsteps moved away back toward the ballroom, and only then did I let myself blink. My mind grabbed that sentence and started turning it over like a sharp object in my hand. The Callaways have money. He'd said it like a fact, like it was the foundation of whatever he was building. But it didn't line up with reality, unless he was seeing something my family didn't understand. And then another reality surfaced, one I kept buried because even thinking about it made me feel stupidly loyal. For years now, my family had been fine. Not thriving, not traveling the world, but fine in the ways that mattered. The mortgage payments never seemed late. The utility bills got paid. When my mother needed dental work, it happened. When the car needed repairs, it got repaired. Not dramatic, not flashy, but steady. The kind of steady that shouldn't have been possible on Evan's salary if he was also building a life with Blair's tastes and her family's expectations. I didn't have the full answer yet, but I felt the edge of it. There was money in the system. Real money. And someone out there believed it was Evan. I moved back toward the ballroom entrance and cut through a quieter side passage that led near the restrooms. The crowd here was thinner, mostly guests, slipping out to make calls, touch up makeup, adjust ties, breathe. I told myself I was just going to rejoin the party and watch. Keep my eyes open. Stay calm. That lasted about 12 seconds. Blair appeared like she'd been waiting for me, her perfume hitting before her voice did. She stepped into my path with a smile so sweet it could have been on a wedding cake. "Zeph," she said brightly, like we were friends. Like she hadn't branded me with that word the moment I walked in. She looped her fingers lightly around my forearm, just enough pressure to guide, not enough to look aggressive. "Can we talk? Just a quick minute." I didn't want her touching me. I didn't want the show. But I also didn't want a scene. She knew that. She'd counted on it. She steered me toward a corner near the restrooms where the music was softer and the lighting didn't reach as far. The second we were out of earshot, her smile died like someone flipped a switch. "I'm going to be honest," she said, voice low and flat. "You confuse me." I didn't answer. I held her gaze, letting silence do what it always did, make people reveal more than they meant to. Her eyes flicked over my jacket, my boots, the plainness of me. "I hear you send money home every month," she said, like clockwork, playing the good son from a distance. My stomach tightened. I kept my face neutral. "Do you?" She gave a small laugh, cruel and quick. "It's not exactly a secret. People talk, especially when it makes a good story." Her fingers brushed the ring on her hand, my grandfather's ring, like it was a nervous habit or maybe a threat. "What I don't get is why. You don't exactly look like you've got much. So what is it? Guilt, desperation, trying to buy your way back into a family that never picked you?" Heat rushed up my neck again, the same old heat, the same old humiliation. Only now it was wearing a designer dress and speaking in a calm voice. She leaned closer. "Evan tells me everything she said, and there was something in the way she said his name. Ownership, not affection. He says you've always been jealous, that you can't stand being second, that you show up just to remind everyone you exist. That wasn't Evan. Not fully. Evan could be careless, self-centered, blind. But the venom in that sentence, that came from her. She'd taken whatever he'd said in passing, whatever small complaints he'd made without thinking, and sharpened them into a weapon. And honestly, she continued, it would be better for everyone if you stayed away. From the wedding, from Evan, from this family. Nobody's going to miss you, Zeph. You're dead weight." There it was. The point of the conversation. Not curiosity, not bonding, a warning. I watched her face as she said it, the composure, the certainty. She wasn't just insulting me because she could. She was clearing space, removing friction, making sure nothing disrupted whatever she and her family were building around Evan. I kept my voice quiet. "Is that so?" She smiled again, but it wasn't sweet this time. It was sharp. "I'm trying to do you a favor," she said. "You can go back to wherever you came from. No one needs you here." Then she said the part that snapped something into place. "I mean, it's kind of pathetic," she added almost casually, "sending money you probably can't afford just to prove you're not a failure." She believed I was broke. She believed the money wasn't mine. She believed Evan, my golden boy brother, was the source of whatever stability my family had, and I was just a wannabe playing martyr. That meant she and her family had done homework. Not on me, on the Callaways. They had studied the story my mother told at church and at family gatherings and over the phone. They had listened for weakness. They had found the idea of money real or imagined, and they had aimed straight at it. Blair patted my arm like she was comforting a child and turned to leave. I let her walk away. Not because she didn't deserve a response, because I didn't want to give her what she wanted, a public outburst she could use to paint me as unstable, resentful, dangerous. If she could turn Evan against me, she'd make it easier to push me out permanently. She'd make it easier to control him. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw Evan's name. Evan. Where are you? Can we talk? Something feels off with my future in-laws. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Part of me wanted to grab him by the collar and drag him into the service corridor and tell him what I'd heard. Tell him to run. Tell him he was being played. But another part of me, the part trained by years of watching people lie, knew that if I moved too soon, the whole thing would evaporate. If Evan confronted Blair even a little, she'd warn her parents. They'd get quiet. They'd get polite. They'd disappear, and my brother would be left with nothing but doubt and denial, easy for her to smooth over. I typed back after the toast, "Stay where you are." I hated myself for how cold it felt, but I hit send anyway. Then I looked up and saw the service door at the edge of the room, half hidden behind a curtain. Rowan Pike was near it, speaking quietly into a radio, eyes moving across the ballroom like he was tracking patterns. He glanced at me and I gave him a barely there motion with my fingers. "Come here, now." He didn't rush. He didn't look like he was obeying anyone. He simply drifted in my direction with the calm of a man doing his job. When he reached me, I didn't say his name. I didn't call him GM. I kept my voice low, casual, like we were two strangers discussing the weather. "I need background on the Ashfords," I said. "Everything you can verify quickly. Business records, lawsuits, news. Anything that explains why her father sounds like a man trying to outrun something." Rowan's eyes sharpened. "How fast? 60 minutes, I said. 90 at most." He didn't ask why. He didn't ask if I was sure. That was why I trusted him with my buildings, my staff, my reputation. He simply nodded once. "Understood. I want it clean," I added. "No rumors. Nothing we can't back up." Rowan's mouth tightened into the smallest hint of a smile. "Clean. Verified. I'll get you what's real." He slipped away toward the service corridor, and I stood there for a second watching Blair laugh again under the chandelier light like she hadn't just tried to erase me from my brother's life. I took a slow breath, felt the bourbon in my bloodstream, felt the anger settle into something colder and more useful. I walked back into the ballroom as if nothing had happened, as if I was just the country boy in the wrong boots at the wrong party. I let the room keep underestimating me. I let Blair believe she'd won that private conversation, but inside a line had been drawn. If I didn't act, Evan would marry into whatever Graham was hiding. My family would become collateral, and Blair would wear my grandfather's ring like a trophy forever. I wasn't going to fight her with insults. I wasn't going to beg for respect. I was going to answer with the only thing that can't be laughed off in a room full of people trying to look important. Truth. Paper. Evidence. And the kind of consequences nobody can air-kiss their way out of. The thing about running hotels is you learn how to move through a building without being seen. Guests think the lobby is the whole world. They don't notice the arteries behind the walls, the service corridors, the staff stairwells, the rooms with cameras and monitors and clipboards that keep the fantasy alive. I used one of those arteries now. I slipped out of the ballroom again, not fast enough to look frantic, and headed for the service corridor. The music faded behind me. A cart of clean linens rolled past, pushed by a housekeeper who didn't look up because she didn't need to. She knew her job. She knew the rules. In my buildings, professionalism meant you didn't stare. You didn't gossip. You didn't break the spell. Rowan was waiting near the service door like he'd anticipated my return. Not with a folder yet too soon, but with that alert, ready posture that said he'd already started pulling threads. "I've got people on it," he said quietly, walking beside me as if we were headed to check a thermostat. "Vendor list, corporate registry, press, mentions court records. Anything that connects." "Good," I said. I want it in my hands before 9. Rowan's eyes flicked to my face, reading the seriousness there. Something else happened. I didn't answer directly. "Keep it discreet." He nodded once, then peeled off toward an internal office, already pulling his phone out. I kept moving down the staff stairwell and into the garage where the air was colder and smelled like concrete and exhaust. The silence down here was a relief. No laughing, no champagne, no chandeliers pretending everything was beautiful. I leaned against a pillar and pulled my phone back out. This time I didn't call Evan. I called Marjorie Keene. She picked up on the second ring because that was who she was. Not warm, not chatty. Reliable in the way you paid for when the stakes were real. "Zeph," she said, "you don't call me during an engagement party unless something's on fire." "Something is," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "I need you to verify information fast, and I need it done in a way that holds up if it becomes public." A pause. "Then tell me what you know." I told her what I'd overheard. I told her Graham had said my family had money and that they just needed to get through the ceremony. I told her I was seeing behavior that didn't match the picture they were selling. I told her the bride had just cornered me and referenced money being sent to my mother every month as if she'd been briefed on it. Marjorie exhaled, quiet, but sharp. "If you're talking about public exposure, you need more than instincts. You need documents. You need attribution. You need a clean chain." "I know," I said. "That's why I called you." "Good," she replied. "Because if you go off half-cocked and accuse people of fraud in front of witnesses, they will come for you. Even if they're guilty. Especially if they're guilty. I'm not interested in theater," I said. "I'm interested in stopping them from getting what they want." Marjorie went quiet for a beat, then asked the question that made my throat tighten all over again. "Zeph," she said carefully, "this money they're sniffing around, where is it actually coming from?" I stared at the painted line on the garage floor as if it had the answer. I could have lied. Could have said I didn't know. Could have said it was Evan. That was the story my mother loved. That was the story everyone believed. But Marjorie wasn't my mother. She wasn't here for a story. She was here for the truth that could survive cross-examination. "It's from me," I said. Silence. "My family's bills." I continued, voice low, steady. "Mortgage help, utilities, medical stuff. Quiet payments through my company. I never put my name on it." Why, Marjorie asked, not judgmental, just direct. Because I wanted them safe. Because part of me still hoped they'd love me if I didn't make them uncomfortable. Because I didn't want gratitude that would turn into entitlement. Because I didn't want Lorraine to look at me the way she looked at Evan, like a mirror she could use to admire herself. I didn't say all that. I said the simplest version. Because they're my family. Marjorie's tone shifted into something harder. "Okay, then this changes the risk. If those people believe Evan is the source, they're targeting him. And if you've been paying, they may believe your family has assets it doesn't. That can escalate quickly." I know I said again, and I meant it in a way I hadn't 5 minutes ago. Because now I could see it. The picture forming. A family performing wealth too loudly. A father who sounded like he was racing a deadline. A bride who wanted me gone. Evan being pulled deeper into their orbit. Marjorie asked, "Do you have anyone gathering background?" I set it in motion, I said. "Rowan Pike." "Good," she replied. "I want you to loop me the moment you have anything verifiable. And Zeph, do not confront them alone. Keep your distance. Let paperwork do the work." When we hung up, I didn't feel calmer. I felt sharper. I made one more call, this one to Devon Sato. If Marjorie was the blade, Devon was the microscope. The kind of forensic accountant who could look at a set of numbers and tell you where the lies were hiding. Devon answered with a tired voice, then woke up fast when he heard mine. "You're at a party, aren't you?" "Something like that," I said. "I need you to pull anything on the Ashford name, Graham and Celeste. Real estate, investments, anything that smells like investor money. I need patterns." Devon didn't ask why. He never did when the request sounded urgent. "Give me a location. Chicago," I said. "But I have a feeling the trail doesn't start here." Devon made a small sound of agreement. It rarely does. I fed him what I had, names, the hotel venue, any details I'd noticed. Then I added, "Look for a structure where early investors get paid with later money. Look for shell companies. Look for projects that don't exist or are inflated." Devon paused. "That's a specific ask." "I'm trying to be useful," I said, and my own voice surprised me with how controlled it sounded. Like I'd already made the decision even if my heart was still catching up. "Give me an hour," Devin said, "maybe less." When the call ended, I stood in the garage a moment longer, letting the cold air settle my thoughts. This was the part nobody ever saw. Not the champagne tower, or the stage, or the bride's smile. The part where you decide what kind of man you're going to be when the people you love don't deserve saving, but you can't stomach watching them drown. I thought of Lorraine at church laughing with neighbors, telling anyone who would listen that Evan takes care of everything. I could hear her voice so clearly it made my jaw clench. She'd said it with pride, with relief, with the smug comfort of believing her golden boy had fulfilled his role. And in doing so, she'd painted a target on his back the size of a billboard. That was the ugly truth. My mother hadn't just given away my grandfather's ring. She'd given away the illusion of money, too. She'd fed it to the world without checking where it came from. And people like the Ashfords people who lived by taking knew exactly how to follow the scent. I went back upstairs through the staff stairwell and re-entered the ballroom like a ghost. Nothing about my face gave away the fact that the night had changed. I took my place near the edge again, bourbon in hand like a prop. Blair was laughing with her friends, radiant, easy, triumphant. But now I saw the calculation beneath the radiance. The way she scanned the room after every interaction. The way she kept checking where her father was. The way her smile tightened whenever Evan drifted towards someone who wasn't her. And Evan was being handled. Graham had him near the bar now, one hand on Evan's shoulder, guiding him from group to group like he was introducing a prize. "You have to meet this guy," Graham said, loud enough for me to catch. "Great connections, big opportunities." He kept pressing a drink into Evan's hand, the kind of friendly insistence that looks like celebration, but functions like control. Evan's laugh was a little too loud, his cheeks a little too flushed. A man who wanted to believe he'd won something big and didn't realize he was being steered. Blair watched it all with the calm of someone who trusted the process. She wasn't worried about Evan wandering. She was worried about variables, about me, about anything that might snag the line before the hook set. And that private conversation near the restrooms made new sense. She hadn't cornered me because she enjoyed cruelty. She'd cornered me because she needed to know what kind of problem I was. Would I explode? Would I beg? Would I embarrass myself? So she could justify pushing me out. She'd tested me the way you test a door handle before you break in. I didn't give her what she wanted. I gave her nothing at all. My phone buzzed again. A message from Rowan. "Got something. Names don't line up. Multiple entities. Give me a few minutes." My eyes went to the clock on the wall near the service entrance. The minute hand was crawling toward 9 like it had all the time in the world, and suddenly it didn't feel like enough. Whatever Graham planned to say at that toast, whatever ceremony he was racing toward the window was closing. I took a slow sip of bourbon and tasted the oak and the burn and the patience I'd built over a lifetime of being underestimated. Rowan had found a crack. Devin was digging. Marjorie was ready to verify. Evan was still standing beside the wrong woman, trusting the wrong family, wearing that hopeful look like a blindfold. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to make a scene early. I just needed enough truth soon enough to make sure nobody got to walk out of my hotel with my brother's future in their pocket. And as the ballroom began to settle, as guests started turning their attention toward the stage in anticipation of Graham's big moment, I checked the time again and felt the night tighten like a fist. 9 o'clock was coming. Rowan didn't wave me over like a subordinate or treat me like a VIP. He moved the way he always did when a hotel was seconds away from chaos, calm, casual, invisible. He drifted toward the edge of the ballroom, brushed past me as if we were strangers, and murmured, "Conference wing." 2 minutes. Then he kept walking without looking back. I waited a beat, finished the last sip of bourbon like it was no different than any other night, and followed at a distance. The shift from ballroom to back hallway was like crossing a membrane. The laughter softened. The air cooled. The light turned honest. We slipped through a staff door and into the quieter spine of the building, past framed art no one ever stopped to admire, past carpet that didn't sparkle, past doors labeled with plain numbers instead of romantic names. Rowan led me into a small, unused meeting room near the conference wing. No flowers, No champagne. Just a long table, a few chairs, and that faint smell of coffee that never fully leaves corporate spaces. He closed the door, set a thin stack of papers down, and finally met my eyes. "Here's what's real," he said. The first page was a corporate dissolution notice out of Arizona. A company tied to Graham and Celeste Ashford had been terminated recently quietly, like someone trying to erase footprints. Behind it were excerpts from court filings. Not gossip, not rumor. Words stamped by a system that didn't care about social standing. Investment misrepresentation, Rowan said, tapping the line with a knuckle. They were sued, not just once. There are patterns. I flipped through the pages, my fingers suddenly cold. Addresses repeated, same suite numbers, same mailing drops. Phone numbers that matched other entity names. Registered agents that showed up in multiple filings like recurring characters in a bad story. Rowan slid another sheet closer. And this, he said, was the part that made my stomach drop. Some of these contacts overlap with names that don't belong to Ashford. Different LLCs, different brands, same people behind them. I leaned in, scanning, feeling the shape of it. A rotating door of identities, a costume change every time the lights got too bright. My phone rang before I could speak. Devin Sato. I answered on the first ring. "Talk to me." Devin didn't waste breath. "You were right to be worried," he said. "This isn't a family in a little trouble. This is structured." My grip tightened on the phone. "Explain." I pulled transaction histories tied to the entities Rowan found, Devin said. "The money moves through at least 3 layers of shell companies. It pays returns on a schedule that looks too perfect, like someone trying to keep investors calm. And there are cash withdrawals in big chunks right before key dates. Court dates, audit requests. Any moment you'd expect scrutiny." I stared at Rowan's stack of papers, my mind connecting the dots like it couldn't stop once it started. "So it's not just debt," I said. "It's a machine," Devin replied. "And machines don't stop because someone falls in love." I swallowed, eyes flicking to the pages again. "Can you tie Blair to any of it?" Devin hesitated for half a beat, then said, "That's the part you're not going to like." "Say it." "There's an old photo attached to one of the Arizona filings," he said. "Different name on it, different company, same face. I'm not 100% until I pull higher res, but I'd bet my paycheck it's her. Blair Ashford might not be the name she started with." The room felt smaller. Rowan watched my face like he could see the storm forming. "Multiple identities," he said quietly, confirming what Devin couldn't see but what he'd already suspected. Devin kept going. "If she's used another name before, that suggests coordination. This isn't a rich girl marrying your brother. This is a role. A role for what I asked, though. I already felt the answer creeping in." Devin exhaled. "Cover. Access. A clean-looking connection. Something that lets them appear legitimate long enough to reset somewhere else." I thanked him, told him to keep digging, and ended the call. My pulse hammered once, twice, then steadied, settling into something colder. Not panic. Focus. Rowan leaned back slightly. "I also checked social chatter," he said. "Not gossip sites, public records of events, charity boards, guest lists. They've been circling high-visibility rooms for years. They need the optics. They need the photo of respectable family joins, respectable family. A marriage as a stamp of credibility. A family name as a shield. Evan as a door they could walk through." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Marjorie Keene. I stepped away from the table, keeping my voice low. "Tell me you didn't do anything public," she said the second I picked up. "Not yet," I replied. "I have documents. Dissolution. Misrepresentation claims. Patterns. Devin says there's a structure that looks like investor fraud." Marjorie's voice sharpened. "There may be an active federal investigation. I can't confirm without making calls the right way, but I need you to understand what that means. If you expose this carelessly, you can interfere. If you expose it cleanly, you can become leverage for the right people. I'm not trying to play hero," I said. "I'm trying to stop my brother from marrying into this." "I get it," she said, and for the first time all night, I heard something human under her legal precision. I'm going to contact a channel I trust. No promises, no assumptions. But if there's a team tracking these people, they'll want a controlled moment. A controlled moment, I repeated, eyes drifting toward the door as if I could see the ballroom through walls. Yes, she said. Something with witnesses. Something with documentation. Something that forces them to stay put. I looked at Rowan, looked at the stack of papers, thought about the stage, the screen, the planned toast at 9. Okay, I said. Do it. And text me only what you can confirm. When I hung up, Rowan spoke like he'd been waiting. You want the AV ready? It wasn't a question. I nodded once. I want options, I said. I want the ability to put truth in front of a room before anyone can sanitize it. Rowan's jaw tightened. I'll prep the booth. Quietly. Cleanly, I reminded him. Always, he said, and slipped out. I stayed in the meeting room another few seconds, letting my thoughts settle into a plan instead of a spiral. Then I returned to the ballroom the way I'd returned every time, calm face, quiet steps, country boy disguise intact. The party looked the same, bright, expensive, self-satisfied. But now I saw it like a chessboard. Every laugh was a move. Every glass refilled was a distraction. Every photo taken was proof of an illusion someone needed. Blair spotted me within minutes. She didn't come alone this time. She drifted toward Evan, pressed close to his side, and leaned in as if she was whispering something sweet. Then she glanced at me, just once, eyes wide, wounded, innocent. The kind of look that told a story without words. Evan's expression shifted. He looked at me like I'd stepped on something fragile. I watched the moment play out in real time, her hand on his arm, the soft tilt of her head, the slight tremble of her mouth like she was holding back tears. A performance designed for one audience, my brother, and it landed exactly where she aimed it. Evan walked toward me a few steps, then stopped unsure. The distance between us felt like a decade. What did you say to her? He asked. I kept my voice level. She stopped me near the restrooms, I said. She told me to stay away from you. From the wedding. Evan blinked like he didn't want to process it. She said you were hostile, he muttered. That you were trying to ruin this. I felt something in my chest tighten, not anger this time, but a tired kind of hurt. Even now, even with his own gut telling him something was off, he was halfway ready to believe the worst of me because it fit the old family script. I haven't done anything, I said. I'm watching. Why, he demanded, and for a split second, his voice carried that defensive edge I'd heard in him since childhood whenever he felt his spotlight threatened. Why can't you just be happy for me? I almost laughed again, but it wasn't funny. I want you happy, I said. That's the problem. He stared at me like he didn't understand what that meant. Before I could say more, Lorraine appeared as if summoned by tension. She took my elbow, not gently, and pulled me a few steps away, smiling for anyone who might be watching while her fingers pressed hard enough to bruise. What are you doing? She hissed, her lips barely moving. Nothing, I said. Then why does Blair look upset? She snapped. Do you know how this looks? Her family is important. Evan is finally getting his life where it should be, and you come in here with those boots and that attitude. I didn't upset her, I said, keeping my tone low. She came at me. Lorraine's eyes flashed. Then apologize, she said. Just say something polite. Smooth it over. We are not making a scene tonight. There it was again. The reflex. Protect the image. Sacrifice the inconvenient child. My voice went colder. No. Lorraine's face tightened like I'd slapped her. Excuse me, I'm not apologizing for existing, I said. And I'm not apologizing to someone who thinks she can threaten me in a hallway. Lorraine leaned closer, furious, but careful. You're going to ruin this for your brother, she whispered. And if you do, I swear. She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Her eyes said it. I will choose him. I will always choose him. I stepped back, gently removing her hand from my arm without a scene. I'm not the one ruining anything, I said. But you might want to ask yourself why you're so sure I am. Lorraine opened her mouth to respond, then stopped because someone walked past and she needed her smile again. She drifted away, leaving me standing alone in a room full of people who didn't see me until I became a problem. Blair reappeared near the bar laughing with friends, her earlier wounded look already gone. That was how fast she could change masks. And now that I knew she'd been using them for years, it felt less like personality and more like practice. I caught Graham's eye across the room. He was on his phone again, turning slightly away from the crowd. His expression was strained, then smooth, then strained again. When he ended the call, he looked toward the exits the way a man looks at water when he's been in the desert too long. A man preparing to run. Rowan passed me again, barely breaking stride, and murmured, "Booth is ready. Control is ours if we need it." I gave him a small nod. Then I found Hank Delacroix near the edge of the ballroom, head of security, earpiece in posture steady. I didn't introduce myself. I didn't have to. Hank knew who signed his paychecks. He also knew the value of discretion. "Keep eyes on the side doors," I said softly. No drama, just awareness. Hank's gaze didn't shift, but he acknowledged me with the smallest tilt of his head. Understood. My phone buzzed with a message from Marjorie. "Working the channel. Likely active case. Stand by. If confirmed, they'll want a public anchor. Public anchor. Controlled moment. Witnesses." I looked at the stage. At the screen still showing Evan and Blair smiling in curated sunlight. At the microphone waiting for Graham's toast. If I waited until tomorrow, they would vanish. They'd take Evan's trust with them. They'd take the ring. They'd take whatever signatures and promises they could extract from him tonight. And my family would wake up to a nightmare they couldn't explain. I stayed where I was, watching Graham and Blair and Celeste like a man watching storm clouds move in. The ballroom lights kept glittering. The champagne kept flowing. The DJ kept the mood bright. But beneath it, something had started to crack. By the time the clock edged past 8:40, the energy in the ballroom had shifted from mingling to anticipation. People kept glancing toward the stage. The DJ lowered the volume between songs, testing the room like he knew a speech was coming. Servers began clearing plates more aggressively, creating open space as if preparing for the night's official moment. Rowan met me near the service door and guided me through it with the same casual invisibility as before. We moved quickly now, not panicked but purposeful, the way you move when you know the fire alarm is about to ring and you want everyone out before smoke shows. The AV room was small and controlled a box of screens and switches and cables that held power over the ballroom's mood. 2 technicians sat at the console. They glanced up, saw Rowan, and immediately made space without asking questions. Professional, disciplined, loyal to the operation, not the gossip. Rowan leaned in close. "We can take the stage screen anytime," he said. "It's routed through here. One command switches the feed." I looked at the monitor showing the ballroom. Evan and Blair on screen smiling. Guests drifting toward their seats. Graham adjusting his tie, checking his phone again. Celeste hovering like a glittering shadow. Rowan continued. "If you want it arranged, I can load a sequence. Start with the court document. Then the flowcharts Devin referenced. Then the photos and identity links." "Do it," I said. Rowan's eyebrows lifted slightly. "In what order?" "Begin with something nobody can argue is fake," I said. "Stamped, dated. Then build the story with numbers. Then finish with faces. People can deny numbers. They can't deny their own face." Rowan nodded once and started working the console, pulling files from a secure drive he'd already prepared. I watched his hands move with practiced precision. This wasn't drama for him. It was procedure. A system doing what it was built to do. From there, we went to the security office. It smelled like coffee and electronics and the faint ozone of too many monitors running at once. Camera feeds lined the wall, every hallway, every exit, every stairwell. Hank Delacroix stood in front of the screen's earpiece and jaw set. Rowan spoke first. "We have reason to believe the Ashfords may attempt to leave quickly. Quiet coverage." Hank looked at me, and I could see he already knew. "Side doors are staffed," he said. "Service elevators, too. No one gets blocked unless you say so. But we can slow movement without making it obvious." "Good," I said. "No spectacle. Just Keep them from slipping out before we can finish what needs finishing. Hank's eyes narrowed at the monitor. That man's already staging, he murmured. I followed his gaze to a feed near the loading area. A young man in a suit and assistant maybe pushed a small, expensive-looking carry-on toward a waiting car. He spoke to a valet, then pointed toward the service entrance as if requesting a private route. Whose bag? I asked. Hank tapped his radio, once listened, then answered. Ashford's. Not Evan. Not your family. So they were packing. During the engagement party, while everyone else was drinking toasts and taking photos. They weren't celebrating. They were managing an operation. My phone buzzed again. Evan. Don't do anything tonight. Blair says you're trying to sabotage us. Please, just let us have this. My fingers tightened around the phone until my knuckles ached. That message wasn't just Evan's voice. It was Blair's hand on his shoulder, her soft crying voice in his ear, her story threading itself into his doubts until he couldn't tell which feelings were his. They were isolating him, making sure his only source of truth was them. I didn't reply. If I wrote back with warnings, he'd show her. If he showed her, she'd warn Graham. If Graham was already staging bags, they'd accelerate. They'd disappear and leave my brother holding nothing but a ring-shaped bruise. Hank's radio crackled softly. He listened, then spoke in a low tone. Copy. Keep it smooth. He turned to me. Graham's been back near the stage twice in 10 minutes, he said. He's talking to people like he's closing a deal. I felt my stomach sink, not from fear but from anger that had nowhere to go except forward. We moved back into the service corridor and approached the backstage area near the ballroom. I didn't step into the room yet. I stayed in the quiet seam between the public and the private, listening to the muffled swell of voices through the wall. And then I heard Graham again. He was near the curtain, close enough that his voice slipped through the gap between fabric and frame. He was speaking to someone, Celeste maybe, or the assistant. All we have to do is get through the speech, he said, tight and urgent. Once that's done, we're set. Set for what? Set to leave. Set to lock Evan in. Set to look legitimate long enough to outrun whatever was chasing them. The statement landed like confirmation of everything I'd been building in my mind all night. Not paranoia. Not family drama. A timeline. A target. A closing window. I stepped back, heart steady now in that unsettling way it gets when a decision becomes permanent. Lorraine appeared at the end of the corridor like she'd been searching for me. Her heels clicked on the tile too loud for a space meant for quiet. Her face was flushed not with joy, with rage restrained by manners. What are you doing back here? She demanded the second she reached me. Breathing, I said. Lorraine's eyes cut. Don't play games with me. Evan is upset. Blair is upset. And everyone can tell something is off. She lowered her voice, leaning in the way she used to when she wanted to control me without being seen controlling me. You need to stop whatever you're planning. I held her gaze. You think I'm planning something. I know you, she snapped. You always do this. You can't just be happy for him. You always have to make it about you. My jaw clenched hard enough to hurt. You've made my entire life about him, I said quietly. Lorraine flinched like she'd heard something she didn't want to acknowledge. Then her eyes hardened again. This is not the time for your feelings. It's never the time, I said. Her voice turned icy. If you cause a scene tonight, she whispered, I will cut you off in front of everyone. Do you hear me? I will tell them you're not part of this family. I will make sure you don't come near Evan again. For a moment, something old and raw moved through me, the little boy who wanted his mother's approval like oxygen. The teenager who left because he couldn't survive the constant comparison. The adult who still paid her bills quietly because some part of him couldn't stop trying. And then I looked past her through the service door window and saw Evan on the ballroom feed in my mind, standing beside Blair, smiling on the surface trapped underneath. I realized something so clear it almost made me calm. Lorraine could cut me off socially. She could embarrass me. She could say words that hurt. But she couldn't undo what was coming if I stayed silent. If I stayed silent, Evan would be bound to these people, and the consequences wouldn't be an argument at a party. They'd be legal, financial, Public. Permanent. I lowered my voice to match hers. If you want to disown me for telling the truth, I said, then you were never my mother in the ways that mattered. Lorraine's breath caught, and for a second I saw fear in her face, not fear of me. Fear of the mirror I'd just held up. Then she straightened her posture and turned her anger back into a mask. Fine, she said. Do whatever you want. Just don't you dare blame me for what happens. She walked away, heels clicking like a countdown. I stood there alone in the corridor, feeling the last thread of restraint inside me snap into something clean and sharp. I texted Rowan, sequence ready. Stand by. Only move when I say. Rowan replied instantly. Ready. I texted Marjorie, I have verified docs and a public venue. If your channel confirms federal interest, tell them where to be and when. A few seconds later, working on it. If confirmed, they'll stage outside. Do not proceed until I say you have clean confirmation. I slipped back into the ballroom, taking my place near the edge with the same unremarkable posture as always. The room was settling now. Guests were facing the stage, glasses in hand. The DJ lowered the music to a gentle hush. The screen behind the stage glowed with another soft focus photo of Evan and Blair smiling like nothing in the world could touch them. Graham stepped toward the microphone, straightening his tie with the confidence of a man who believed he was about to win. Blair stood at Evan's side, her smile flawless, the signet ring catching chandelier light with every slight movement of her hand. Evan looked toward the crowd, then toward Blair, then briefly. Briefly his eyes found mine. There was a flicker there. Doubt. A plea. Confusion. I didn't give him a speech. I didn't give him a warning he wouldn't believe. I gave him my presence. Steady. Unmoved. Like a lighthouse he didn't understand yet. My phone was in my pocket, my hand wrapped around it, thumb hovering where one word could shift an entire room. The clock on the wall slid toward 8:59. The ballroom went quiet in that ceremonial way, the way people hush because they're trained to respect a microphone. Graham cleared his throat and smiled, and I watched the big screen behind him still showing a happy lie, and I held my breath for the moment I was about to change what the entire room thought was true. At 8:59 p.m. the room leaned forward without realizing it. That subtle shift happened the way it always does before something irreversible, glasses lowered. Conversations, thinned bodies angled toward the stage. Graham Ashford stepped up to the microphone with the ease of a man who believed the night belonged to him. He smoothed his tie, smiled wide, and let his gaze sweep the ballroom like a host welcoming guests into a home he fully expected to keep. Behind him, the massive screen glowed with a carefully curated slideshow of Evan and Blair. Sunlit smiles, champagne flutes clinking. A love story edited to perfection. Blair stood just below the stage posture, immaculate, one hand resting lightly on Evan's arm. The antique signet ring gleamed on her finger, catching the chandelier light like it had every right to be there. Evan looked proud, happy, and if you knew him well enough, you could see the faint tension at the edges of his smile, like a man holding his breath underwater. I stayed where I was near the edge of the room, close enough to see the exits and far enough to be overlooked. My phone rested in my jacket pocket, warm against my palm. I felt steady, not numb. Ready. Graham began to speak about family, about honor, about how proud he was to welcome Evan into theirs. The words were smooth, practiced, delivered with the cadence of someone who had said similar things in other rooms under other names. At exactly 9:00 p.m., I sent Rowan one word. Now. The screen behind Graham flickered once. The smiling photos vanished. In their place appeared a scanned court document, stark and official, stamped and dated, the kind of page that doesn't care who's rich or charming. A name sat at the center of it, bold and unmistakable. Tessa Wynn. The air in the ballroom changed instantly. A ripple ran through the crowd, confusion first, then recognition that this wasn't a glitch. This wasn't part of the program. Graham faltered mid-sentence. His smile froze, then cracked. "Looks like we're having a little technical issue," he said into the microphone, laughing too loudly. He turned his head sharply toward the AV booth. "Can we fix that?" The screen changed again before anyone could answer him. This time, it was a diagram. Clean lines showing money flowing through layered companies, arrows looping in ways that made even the least financially literate guest uneasy. Numbers marched across the screen, amounts, invested amounts, withdrawn dates lining up with legal filings highlighted in red. Phones came up across the room like a wave. Whispers multiplied, collided, grew louder. The next slide replaced the diagram with a headline from an Arizona newspaper. The words investment fraud and misrepresentation were impossible to miss. Below them, a list of projects that never existed, families who never got their savings back. Then came the photos. A younger Blair hair, darker smile, the same standing beside Graham and Celeste at a charity event under different names. Another image followed. Another. Different cities. Different identities. Same faces. The sound in the room shifted from murmur to uproar. Celeste Ashford stood, rigid fingers clawing at her necklace as if it might anchor her. Blair's perfect posture collapsed into something sharp and feral. Her eyes darted toward the exits, then toward Evan, then toward the booth, searching for control that no longer existed. Graham tried to speak again, raising the microphone, but the room no longer belonged to him. That was when I stepped forward. I moved calmly, deliberately up the aisle, the way you walk when you know everyone is already watching, whether they meant to or not. I reached the stage as Graham turned startled, and before he could protest, I took the microphone from his hand. The silence that followed was heavier than any applause. "My name is Jace Calloway," I said, my voice steady, carrying without effort. "Most of you don't know me. That's been convenient tonight." A few heads turned. Lorraine's face drained of color. Evan stared at me like the floor had shifted beneath his feet. "I didn't plan to speak," I continued. "But when lies are told this loudly, truth has a way of demanding the microphone." I gestured slightly, and Rowan's voice came through the speakers, composed and professional. For clarity, he said, "Jace Calloway is the owner of Monarch Ark Hotel and CEO of Ironclad Hospitality Group." The reaction hit in layers, gasps, sharp inhales, a few stunned laughs that died immediately. Lorraine swayed, gripping the edge of a chair. Evan's mouth opened, then closed, his entire understanding of the night rearranging itself in real time. Blair spun toward me. "This is insane," she screamed, her voice slicing through the room. "He's lying. He's jealous. He's always been jealous. He's trying to destroy us because he can't stand seeing Evan happy." The words echoed desperate and raw, and that desperation betrayed her more than any document could have. She wasn't defending facts. She was attacking character. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult her back. "The names on that screen," I said, "are not opinions. They are records. The transactions are not rumors. They are traceable. The investigations referenced there are not vendettas. They are active." Graham lunged toward me, face red. "You don't understand what you're doing," he hissed. "This is a misunderstanding. We can explain." "No," I said simply. "You can't." I turned slightly, making sure my voice carried to the edges of the room. "I'm not here because I was insulted tonight," I said. "I'm here because my family was selected as cover, because my brother was targeted as a credential, because lies were wrapped in a wedding and sold as love." Blair sobbed, now loud and theatrical, clinging to Evan's arm. "Please," she begged him. "You know me. You know us." Evan looked down at her hand on his sleeve. Then he looked at the screen, then at me. "I don't know who you are," he said quietly, pulling his arm free. The words were soft, but they landed like a gavel. Blair staggered back as if struck. Movement surged near the ballroom doors. Security shifted positions smoothly, bodies appearing where exits had been seconds ago. The hum of anticipation turned sharp. "There is a federal investigative team currently tracking the individuals on that screen," I said. "They are outside this building." Graham's eyes flicked toward the doors. Celeste grabbed his arm. Blair took one instinctive step backward, then another. I held the microphone, my gaze fixed forward, and then the doors opened. The room fell into a stunned quiet as Special Agent Dana Kincaid stepped inside, badge visible, posture unmistakable. Two agents followed her, scanning the space with practiced efficiency. This wasn't a raid fueled by chaos. This was procedure arriving exactly when it needed to. Dana's voice cut clean through the air. Graham Ashford, she said, also known under multiple registered identities, you are being detained in connection with wire fraud, investment fraud, and conspiracy. Graham sputtered, stepping back. This is outrageous. You can't just, I want my lawyer. You'll have that opportunity, Dana replied evenly. Not here. Celeste broke down immediately, tears streaming, hands fluttering uselessly as if grief alone could erase years of deception. Blair Tessa lunged toward Evan again, her voice cracking. Tell them they're wrong. Tell them this is a mistake. Please. Evan didn't move. Security closed in as the agents took control. Graham tried once more to twist free, but the effort was half-hearted, already defeated. As Blair struggled, the antique signet ring slipped from her finger and hit the marble floor with a sharp final sound. The ring rolled to a stop near Evan's shoes. He stared at it for a long second, then bent down and picked it up. His hand trembled slightly as he turned it over, thumb brushing the worn engraving. He walked toward me and placed it in my palm. This was never hers, he said quietly. I'm sorry. The weight of it felt familiar. Right. Blair screamed my name as they pulled her away, the old insult spilling out of her mouth like a curse she couldn't let go of. You think you won, she shouted. You're nothing but. Hank stepped in firm and unyielding, stopping her before she could reach me. I leaned just close enough for her to hear.